Hello, my name is Bertaniti Giovanni Tayetto. You can call me Gio for short, but please don't call me short. And I know what you're thinking. Man, that's a pretty long name, and it is. It's about 26 characters, rarely fits in applications. I know what you're probably wondering as well. That's an Italian name. Is this guy Italian? He doesn't look like it. Where's the accent? And no, I'm not Italian. I'm actually Haitian and Mexican. But I know what you're probably thinking at this point, and that's, what am I getting myself into? This guy seems to be really into his own name. Well, the thing is about a name is that there's always stories behind it, and I love stories. See, the stories behind people's names are what makes us up as a person. It's what makes us unique, different, and for some people, it even defines them. So in a way, you can say that the names are the cover to our stories. And you know how the saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover. We all know how it feels, though, to be judged or to judge, because we all have our biases, our life experiences, education, and many other things that help form our perception or interpretation of things. So when you're judging someone, you're allowing your perception or interpretation to tell that person's stories versus just understanding them and accepting them first. See, that's the thing. Judging has always been easy, but accepting someone is pretty hard. I'd like to tell you a story behind my name, right? And that story starts with the fact that I am a Mexican and Haitian man. I am the first generation son of two immigrants by the names of Antonia Guterres from Mexico and Flatanais Joseph from Haiti. As you can tell, I don't really share the same last name as my parents. And the reason behind that is because of my dad. He wasn't much of a rule follower. And in the time that he was growing up in Haiti was around the same time that they had a heavy military dictatorship. So when it came to the point where he had to be drafted into the army, it didn't take much time till he ended up in jail. After 2 years of being in jail, he was released and he quickly joined the rebellion. Like I said, my father wasn't much of a rule follower. So let's just say he was a pretty great rebel. And it was so great that it got to the point that he was either going to be executed on the island or he was going to end up in America. He chose America, just like many other people do. But he also chose to steal a man's identity. And thus, Joe Tayetto was born, and many years later, Bertaniti Giovanni Tayetto was too. Crazy story, right? I know. But that's just one story of many that makes up who I am as a person. See, the stories behind our names are what makes us so unique, right? And that's why I love a good story, because it's there to break the ice. It's there to help us connect. Most importantly, the stories behind our names are there to humanize things and build curiosity and even build some kind of form of understanding. But unfortunately, nowadays, people don't tell their whole stories. Some people don't even know their own stories because they don't take the time to get to know themselves. And in some cases as well, people don't know how to share their stories because we were never taught how to communicate those things. I used to be one of those people. I love to talk. But at some point in my life, I started to build this big wall, bigger than the one that they have over there in China. So big that I added a front because I wanted people to feel more comfortable about my stories. I used to tell myself that if I could just get somebody to like me, everything would be okay. But what I didn't realize is by not being true to myself, and by not being able to share my own stories, I wasn't allowing people to accept me. I wasn't allowing people in. See, you know how the other saying goes, right? The loudest person in the room tends to be the saddest. Well, I was pretty loud. So that sadness led to my inner battle with chronic loneliness. And that loneliness led to years of negative mental behavior, mental isolation, and just overall not feeling accepted by people. And I know what you're wondering or thinking at this point. This guy alone, lonely. I mean, he has a cool name, he's giving a TED Talk. He can't be or feel that way. But see, that's the problem right there. We all just judge people. We don't give each other enough grace and realize that people can lie to themselves or lie to others about their stories. But what we can no longer do is lie about the fact that we cannot be alone. Okay? Alone time can be a good time. But when I say that we can't, I mean that we can't. In my battle with loneliness, I learned that loneliness can lead to serious health issues. Things like depression, things like anxiety, things like heart disease. And in some studies, they have found that it could increase your chances of death. That's weird, right? Loneliness. We were all taught that it was just an emotion. But in reality, it's actually a physiological experience that we have in our bodies. The best way to think about it is it's when it's time to eat. Our body tells us that we're hungry. So when you're alone, your body makes you feel lonely because it's telling you to be around people, that you're safer with people. So now, in a time of civil unrest, in a time where we're more connected online than we are with people in front of us, in a time where loneliness has become a disease that literally takes years off of your life and it's spreading across the nation, in a time where the color of my skin is still enough of a difference for somebody not to accept me. We have to learn to accept the stories. We have to learn to hear the stories, and most importantly, we have to learn to share the stories. See, now more than ever, we have to become connection builders. And like any builder, you have to have your tools, right? Things like honesty that help build trust, transparency that lets people see your honest self, and vulnerability that invites the people to see who you are as a person. Like I said before, judging is really easy, but accepting someone is very, very hard. It's hard because if we don't learn to accept our own stories, we'll never be able to accept somebody else's. And I'm a person that likes to make things easy, right? So here's an equation for you, and I hope that you write this down. Honesty plus transparency plus vulnerability equals accepting the differences between each other. The key to that equation is vulnerability, because it's the hardest part. See, I can be honest because I'm up here being honest with you, and that's pretty easy. Transparency is a little bit more complicated because it takes courage to really put yourself in front of people. But vulnerability is hard because it takes effort. It takes conviction. Like I said, the best kind of stories are stories told. But my favorite kind of stories are stories that connect people. Stories that connect people apply those three things. So, a story that helps connect is an honest story. Honesty is nothing but a moral character of attributes such as straightforwardness, truthfulness, and integrity. All those things combined allow this honest story to build that trust. A story that helps connect is transparent. Transparency is something that is fine and sheer enough to see through. So when a story is transparent, it is allowing you to see through the storyteller. When a story that is there to connect, it is also vulnerable. Vulnerability is defined as someone that is capable of being physically or emotionally wounded. And the key word there is capable. See, it is an action that takes effort. It's easy, again, to be honest. I'm up here being honest with you. It's a little bit harder to be transparent, again, because it takes a lot of courage, right? And vulnerability is the hardest because it takes conviction, it takes that effort. But I'm a firm believer that you can't ask people to do anything without being able to do it yourself. So I can't sit here and ask you to be more honest and transparent and vulnerable and apply it to your daily life just so you can accept everybody if I'm not willing to do it with you? So I'm here, I'm honest, I'm transparent because you can see me, but now it's time for me to be vulnerable with you. I want to share another story, and this story is where my loneliness began. It's still a hard story for me because it's a story where I wish I would have been more honest and transparent and vulnerable with this person that I went through this with. See, one day during the summer going into my senior year, my mom slipped and fell and hit her head while doing her favorite thing, which was cleaning. As she was taken to the hospital to get and receive stitches and a checkup for her head, they ended up finding a small tumor in her brain. At the time, they told us that that tumor was benign, but honestly, I felt like it wasn't something that was going to go well. But I lied to myself and I lied to my mother and told her everything was going to be fine. Fast forward more time, and now it's a couple of months. It's been a couple of months, and my mom suffered from a serious stroke, a stroke that allowed her body to lose mobility completely from her left side. So we had to rush her to the hospital for emergency brain surgery. I woke up the next day, it's 5 a.m., and I'm in the hospital lobby. And this is where the story really begins because this is a point in my life where I felt a true sense of honesty. As I was walking up to my mom's room, so was the doctor. The doctor looks at me and asks me, "Are you the son of Antonia?" And without hesitation, I say yes. He looks at me and he says, "I'm sorry, but your mother has a rare form of brain cancer that isn't treatable. We believe that she only has 3 to 6 months to live, and we're not really sure if she's ever going to walk or talk the same way." He looked me in my eyes again and he says that he's very, very sorry. I thought he was supposed to go into the room, but probably in that moment he switched his mind and he walked the other way. In that moment, though, I knew that he was being honest with me. So I trusted the words that came from him. And when I went into the room, I looked into my mother's eyes and she knew what was going on and I knew what was going on. Fast forward even more time. My mom hits a 1-year mark, doubling the time that they said that she would actually have, but that was the thing. It was borrowed time, and we both knew it. So in our weekly morning walks, I noticed tears coming down my mother's face. And before I could even ask her what was wrong, my mom looked at me and said that she's scared to die. She wasn't scared for me, she wasn't scared for my brother, she wasn't scared for my family, but she was ultimately scared just to be gone. So we just sat down and we talked about it, we cried about it, and we laughed about it. And at some point, we just got real about life. At some point, we got vulnerable with each other. And honestly, that's something we never really used to do. But after that day, there wasn't anything my mom didn't know about me. And after that day, I got to hear the stories behind the name of Antonia Gutierrez. October 30th, 2015, my mother passed. But after that experience, I learned that in life, those 3 things, honesty, transparency, and vulnerability, can help you connect deeply with yourself and the people around you. But like I said before, I did the opposite. I built up this wall. I built up this front. I decided I wasn't going to share my stories, and I decided that I wasn't going to be real with people. That began the slippery slope that was my reality, which was loneliness. But after some time, I decided that I was going to be honest again. And I started with being honest with myself. I reflected on the fact that I lost my father at 11 to suicide. And I didn't want to end up that way. I didn't want to feel those feelings anymore, and I didn't want to be that person. So I decided that I was going to be transparent and see within myself to find the conviction to be more open with others, to be more vulnerable. And over time, it turned into a podcast. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, a podcast just like everybody else, right? But my podcast was about having those honest and transparent and vulnerable conversations around all sorts of kind of topics with all kinds of different people. See, like I said before, vulnerability takes effort. And unknowingly, that podcast became my effort. I found the value again in having those honest and transparent and vulnerable conversations with ourselves or with others. And no, you don't need to have a microphone in front of you to sit down and talk about relationships or love or death or whatever it may be. But what you do need to have is the conviction to be open and honest and let people in. See, now it's our time, as we can see in 2020, that we have to be able to put our differences aside and accept each other. In a time where it's your turn to start sharing the stories behind your name, which I hope you do before life teaches you the hard way as it did for me. Because, honestly, there isn't a day that I don't wish I would have been more honest and transparent and vulnerable with my mom. But I don't have that opportunity now. So I challenge you. I challenge you to be honest with yourself. I challenge you to be transparent with the people around you and the people that love you. And most importantly, I challenge you to be vulnerable so you can accept that love and they can accept yours. Because in 2020, of all years, we can see that life can be short. We can see that life can be pretty damn hard. But life is so much better when we just accept each other. So, to close off, I want to say thank you for allowing me to be honest with you, to be transparent in front of you so you can see who I am, and most importantly, to be vulnerable with you so you can accept the person that I am. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I love you. This was a real talk. Have a good one.